Good morning. Nigeria is live on the network service of the NTA. And before we kickstart our conversation, which is on the legislative agenda of the 10th House of Representatives, let's take this background report put together by Joseph Otsen.
Inaugurated 13th June 2023, the 10th House of Representatives constitutes 276 new and 84 returning members. The Green Chamber came on board, this time under difficult socio-economic circumstances exacerbated by the removal of petroleum subsidy and some degree of insecurity in parts of the country. Fortunately, it has the constitutional backing to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the federal and the state. Expectedly, members of the 10th House of Representatives are aware of the mandate taking into cognizance the state of the nation and desire of the public for policies that will paddle the country to sustainable development. Acknowledging these responsibilities, the Speaker Tajuddin Abbas states, citizens' confidence in government is currently low, and a crisis of legitimacy is affecting the effectiveness of government institutions, including the legislature. This means the House must sit up and be up and doing to be up to speed with the needed guide for a prosperous Nigeria. And to be on top of the game, the Speaker constituted an ad hoc committee on the legislative agenda of the House to set up clear legislative priorities and goals to assist members in addressing the most pressing issues from 2023 to 2027. The committee has produced an 8-point key legislative agenda with set goals of strengthening good governance, improving national security, law reform, economic growth and development, social sector reform and development, inclusion and open parliament, influencing foreign policy and climate change, and environmental sustainability. Speaker Abbas says the areas of focus are carefully crafted to align with the 8-point agenda of the executive for policy consistency and cohesion. The agenda also allows members and committees to plan their work in advance, such as drafting bills, conducting research, engaging with stakeholders, and promptly addressing key priorities. And very importantly, the agenda is to serve as a basic for accountability and evaluation of legislative performance, aiming at building public trust and confidence in the institution. But how well will the lawmakers embrace the legislative template and be ready to be on board? Will these areas of priorities meet public demands and make the 10th House of Representatives independent and more productive? These and other related issues will engage guests on Good Morning Nigeria.
Yeah, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And to kickstart our conversation this morning, we have in the studio Mr. Oke Epia, Executive Director, Order Paper Nigeria. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Well, we still expect other guests to join us in the conversation this morning. But while we await the other guests, I think we'll kickstart our conversation with Mr. Oke Epia. We're looking at the legislative agenda for the 10th House of Representatives. From your own perspective, what do you think should be the focus of this 10th Assembly?
Thank you once again. I like the way the background reports that just played identifies the context of a decline and declining trust, public confidence, in governments, including the legislature. And that background offers a window to properly situate and interrogate the legislative agenda of the 10th Assembly. Bearing in mind that this is not the first time the House of Representatives would have a legislative agenda for 4 years. I think that this practice dates back to the 7th Assembly, if my memory serves me right. So this is, a consecutive, articulation of plans for every 4 years in Fourth Republic National Assembly, or House of Representatives, to be specific. So given this context, it will be important to see how well they have learned from the past, where they have iterated, on the agenda, because I have seen, from what I have seen, some of these things are actually, repetitive, which is fine. Government and governance is a continuum, and that's acceptable. However, it seems to me that that nagging issue of public or lack of public confidence and trust in government, especially the legislature, may not have been sufficiently addressed, in the subsequent legislative agenda and the current one. I concede and admit, I acknowledge that the 10th House of Representatives legislative agenda speaks to something around open parliaments, citizen inclusion and all of that. It's a good, inclusion, but we would be looking out to see the practicability, the implementation of that aspects of the legislative agenda, so but for a general opening comment, I would say that, the 10th House of Representatives has done well in being able to articulate and publish a legislative agenda that I am aware also received public inputs, though may not be sufficient or widespread. That is kudos to them. I am also concerned, however, that the agenda may not have thoroughly, or sufficiently dealt with the issues of public trust, lack of public trust, and the continual declining, public confidence in governments. And recent actions, recent vibes from the House of Representatives, from the National Assembly itself, tends to sustain, or give credence, or further erode the public confidence, in the institution of Parliament.
Many thanks, Mr. Epia, for your opening thoughts there. Very important issues you have raised. Lack of public confidence and trust is a very important issue that must be talked about and should be addressed by, those that should address it. We have joining us now Akin Rotimi. He's the Akin Rotimi Jr., the House spokesman and chairman, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Many thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, so I just quickly want to get to you. I'm sure you heard some of the comments made by Mr. Epia, talking about what the National Assembly should be doing, and the fact that the main issue is the lack of trust. There's no confidence. The people, there's no connection between them and the people that they are representing and all of that. And then now you have come out with an 8-point legislative agenda. Could you please just tell us, what is this 8-point agenda about, and what informed the National Assembly coming up with it?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me again, and good morning, of course. OK is one of our partners that works very closely with us in terms of helping our work in the National Assembly. To start with, every House of Representatives is guided by, every session, every assembly of the House of Representatives is guided by 3 principal instruments. Number 1, the Nigerian Constitution, 1999 as amended, the House rules, and then the legislative agenda. So it's something that has happened in previous assemblies that guides members and even our partners, leadership and everyone, to walk around the framework. You can imagine there are 360 members from different parties, different parts of the country. So it's important that we have a framework within which you frame your bills and motions and all legislative activities, so that we have as much traction as possible and can be as productive as possible. This is particularly important because for the first time in the Fourth Republic, you have 8 political parties that are represented in Parliament. So it's important that you have a multi-partisan document and guide that everybody buys into. And I think it's a lot of credence, it's a lot of a lot of commendation should be given to the leadership, Right Honorable Tajuni Abbas, Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu, and of course, the chairman of the ad hoc committee that produced this, Professor Julius Ihonvere, that thought it wise that we have this legislative agenda. And he did mention that it was produced through a consultative process. You know, we had engagement with civil society, we had engagement with media, we had inputs. And you see, every assembly, the legislative agenda for every assembly is basically determined by what is going on at the time. So in the country at this point in time, you have issues around the economy, around security, around healthcare, social services, and now all these priorities have fed into this document, which is going to guide our legislative activities over the next 4 years. And central to what he said as well is the issues of public confidence. Yes, very correct. The National Assembly. So when you hear anyone say, "Oh, the National Assembly, legislators," and all of that, they'll tell you some things that happened many years ago, even decades ago. You know what I mean? So it's important for people to realize that there's a House of Representatives and then there's the 10th Assembly, right? And we are essentially created a legacy for ourselves by starting out to address the historical issues around apathy, around cynicism, around distrust of, broadly speaking, the political class and political elite, but particularly about legislators. As you know, many years of military incursion in our body politic meant that, Nigerians were used more to, the executive arm of government, and the judiciary, but the legislature, many people still don't understand. What do we even need a legislative arm of government for? So these are the issues that we want to confront. Yes, there were mistakes that were made in previous assemblies, which we have the opportunity to be able to address and, be able to essentially address the issue of distrust by open parliament, like you mentioned, like proactive engagements, like ensuring. And that's why you see central to the entire document is a feedback mechanism, is being proactive with providing information, not only on legislative activities, but also key developments within the House. I think that one thing that government has not done well enough, particularly the legislature, is sharing our success stories and sharing, information about all the good that has been done. So, for example, you have constituency outreach, which is one of the constitutional roles of Parliament. You have 360 members doing extensive work in every part of Nigeria, and it's just often not reported enough. You also have critical arms like public petitions. The fact that any Nigerian can write to their member and say, "Look, I want you to help me table this matter before Parliament," and these issues are tabled on the floor, referred to the House Committee on Public Petitions. And you can actually see many cases where, quote and unquote, ordinary Nigerians are able to get succor, are able to get their issues addressed. So I think these are the important things for us and for myself and members of the Committee on Media and Public Affairs, is to blow our trumpet loud enough so people know just exactly what it is that we're doing.
Okay, thank you, Akin Rotimi Jr., for that explanation, giving us a better clarification of what the 8-point agenda is all about. But a lot of people are saying that it seems that the 8-point agenda that you have rolled out, it aligns with the renewed hope agenda of the federal government. And their fear is that we do hope, or that's what they say, that this 10th National Assembly will not be just a rubber stamp, for the executive. How would you be able to provide that checks and balances, that you're supposed to do as one of your legislative functions? Also, how do you intend to incorporate the items on this agenda into the work plan of the 139 standing committees that you have, which is and also translate to dividend of democracy for the common man on the street?
Yeah, thank you very much. So to start with, it's just a coincidence that you have the executive arm of government having, 8 points in the agenda.
Is it a coincidence or there's something about the number 8?
Well, I don't know, you can tell me, right? But to be honest, it's really just a coincidence, because for our 8-point agenda, it's essentially strengthening good governance, improving national security, law reform, economic growth, social sector reform, inclusive and open parliament, influencing directing Nigeria's foreign policy, climate change and environmental sustainability. Now, yes, there are cross-cutting agendas, right, between what it is that, I might just read that as well, what the executive arm of government. Executive arm of government has food security, ending poverty, economic growth and job creation, access to capital, inclusivity, improving security, rule of law, fighting corruption. So you'll see that there's a nexus somewhere, right, between what it is that they have. But again, Nigerians, essentially need to be able to understand the role of the executive as against the legislature. And it's a critical difference that, many people don't have, to understand that many of the things they demand from the legislature is that actually falls within the ambit of the executive. So for us, when you go through the legislative agenda, you see we're essentially looking at legislative interventions, both in terms of reviewing extant laws or, looking at loopholes to be able to, establish new laws that address certain issues to help the executive to function better. Because the principal arm that deals with implementing policies and programs is the executive. It's not the legislature. Ours is to hold them to account and make sure that there's proper oversight. So for us, again, like I mentioned, when you talk about a rubber stamp, if you follow the proceedings of the House, you know that it's very far from a rubber stamp, because traditionally the Green Chamber has always been that activist arm of the legislature of our bicameral system. You have 360 members from different parts of the country, right? You have 8 political parties represented. The ruling party, yes, but there's 7 others. So you find that there is the need for greater consensus building, right, in all our activities. But aside of that, it's far from it that will be a rubber stamp to the executive. Yes, leadership, and it's there enshrined in our legislative agenda that executive legislature, cooperation, collaboration, and a seamless engagement is very important to us. But it's important that we also keep that distance and make sure that we're able to hold them to account. Now, you talked about the standing committees. You see that every single committee has a clear mandate. Right now, we're revising the House rules to ensure that every committee's jurisdiction and their mandate is very, very clear.
Okay.
And you'll find that there are very important, committees that were also created. So, for example, you have the committee on the monitoring of the legislative agenda. That in itself is a committee, because it's important that we don't just reel out all these documents like, said. It's important that we're able to follow through. It's important that we're able to look at milestones and see if we're meeting those milestones, because failure is incremental and, success as well is incremental. So right here, we have short-term, medium-term, long-term provisions, all clearly indicated. And I think that it's important for Nigerians, right, because it's important that we have, that sort of vigilance. We are actually inviting Nigerians, individuals, institutions, organizations to hold us to account.
Okay.
So we have published our documents to say this is what is going to guide us.
And so after 4 years, if we're not satisfied, then we can always hold you responsible.
No, you don't wait for 4 years, actually. I would encourage that every step, because here we have short term, we have medium term, we have long. You see, and I think that for me personally as a legislator, and I believe that I share that same sentiment with most legislators, we are in a hurry to make a difference. The issues that Nigerians face at this time are especially daunting. We know with the removal of the fuel subsidy, the economic crisis is very intense. Security challenges. Just the other day, we had a sectoral debate that had the defense chiefs, the service chiefs in attendance, because almost every plenary day you have one or two security-related motions. Every part of Nigeria is going through the scourge of insecurity at this time. So we can't afford
Okay.
for 4 years to say, you know, the legislature has failed or government has failed. We can't afford that. We need month on month to say, what is the legislator doing? In fact, we have a program that will be coming on stream soon, you know, titled Waiting Legislator, Waiting Reps They Do Serve.
Okay.
You know, so we would echo what it is that Nigerians say, because you need to be able to know what we are doing. Every single minute that we spend in office, lives literally depend on us, and we're conscious of that huge responsibility that we carry, and we invite everyone to hold us to account to what it is that we've promised.
All right, beautiful, Akin Rotimi Jr. Of course, we'll get back to you so that you explain some issues that you raised while you were talking. But while you were speaking, we had join us Dr. Ernest Ereke. He's a governance and development analyst. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Ereke, you joined us at a point where Akin Rotimi Jr., the House spokesman and chairman, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs, was speaking. And of course, you heard him talk about how this present House wants to do the right thing and make sure that they deliver on this 8-point agenda that they have brought out. What are your views, really, about this House of Representatives, and what are the likely challenges you think they'll face in trying to meet this agenda they have set out for themselves?
Okay, thank you very much. I listened to the honorable member talk about the House not going to be a rubber stamp this time around, as well as some other innovations in the House of Representatives. And I must say that having followed the activities of the 10th House of Representatives, I can say that perhaps probably we can be optimistic about this House not being a rubber stamp, like he said. For instance, only last week, Thursday last week, the House was to hold these sectoral briefs and debates with the service chiefs and the Inspector General of Police. And like the practice in the past, they sent in representatives. And the House rejected those representatives and said that clearly it was stated in their invitation that there will be no appearance by proxy. Now, unlike before, when the leadership of the House or the National Assembly would have gone to the President, you remember the antecedents of going to the President to report to the President that we invited these service chiefs and they didn't come. The House said, we will not take these proxies. And so Tuesday this week, the service chiefs and the Inspector General of Police, all of them were there to address the House. And so I think we are seeing signs, the House is showing signs that it wouldn't be a rubber stamp like the honorable member said. But then again, it is equally important that as citizens, we continue to hold them to account, like he said. We shouldn't wait for the next 4 years before we begin to ask questions. Now, as it relates to the 8-point agenda that the House has released, when you go through the 8-point agenda, you discover that the House has tried to align those agenda points to the critical issues of the moment, talking about reforms within the legislature itself, because you can be constitutionally powerful, but institutionally weak. If you will recall that the National Assembly or the legislature as a whole in Nigeria has not always been there. And so when you look at the three arms of government, you discover that the legislature is the most underdeveloped as a result of the fact that the legislature was always the first victim of any military interruption before 1999. And so institutionally, yes, constitutionally, the Constitution has given the National Assembly the requisite powers to be able to make laws for the good governance of Nigeria. But then institutionally, the Assembly is not as strong as the Constitution envisages. And so this 10th House recognizes this institutional weakness and talks about strengthening good governance, which will include strengthening the institutional capacity of the National Assembly to deliver on the three core mandates of representation, oversight, and lawmaking. And then when you look at what the House has outlined to do as far as strengthening, this institution is concerned, you will discover that these are things that we need to make this legislature, institutionally capable of meeting the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. But the most interesting thing about the legislative agenda of the House is the milestones, as well as, if you like, maybe a work plan that is contained therein, where they have broken it down into short, medium, and long-term, goals that they would want to achieve. And then, importantly, having a legislative agenda implementation committee, as well as a committee on monitoring and evaluation of their own committees. And then, of course, also not forgetting that the Speaker of the House was through a challenge at Nigeria and said, if as legislators we ask other arms of government to account for how they make use of our resources, that the House should be ready to take the same answers from citizens, and therefore challenged citizens to hold members of the National Assembly to account. So I would want to say, yes, we are seeing signs, we should be hopeful, and then we should also continue to ask them questions and hold them to task for the responsibilities we have given to them.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ernest, for that, your thoughts there, that the members of the public should be able to hold the House accountable for all their actions. And I want to throw the question back to Rotimi now, because one of the major questions that the members of the public asked when you people came on board was the issue of this SUV that was purchased, for the House of for the members. And the question is, if you are saying that we are going through this economic turmoil right now, and the country, there is appeal that, okay, we should all go through it and bear the brunt for now, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but you are not towing the same line. How would you, because people are arguing about the cost of governance, that has been the major challenge of our democracy, because they are complaining the amount that we spend on our politicians are just enormous. They are just too much. So how would you be able to defend such, And they are also challenging the fact that why must you even purchase, SUV from abroad when we have local assemblies here that you can get these cars from?
Thank you very much for the question. So to start with, you talked about the cost of governance, right?
Yes.
And it is important for us as well. It's also mainstreamed in the agenda, to in our oversight to make sure that there are cost-cutting measures across the board. Now, I've raised certain important points, particularly in my role as spokesperson of the House, that I've encouraged Nigerians, right, to look into. Number one is that the provisions for work tools and things that are needed for every assembly to function is usually provisioned for in the preceding year before the resumption of a new assembly. So you have new members resuming next year. You don't wait until that year until that is done. So you have a National Assembly bureaucracy that does that. This is even separate from leadership. This is the National Assembly bureaucracy that provisions for the work tools that they need to be able to function. And this, like I said, is in the preceding year. But again, it's sad that many of these things are left to the point where it's done already. Most of these measures were already concluded from last year, and then by the first quarter of this year, all the bureaucratic issues around the procurement had been concluded. So I tried to explain to Nigerians that it's important that we understand this key distinction.
This was not done by the 10th Assembly.
It's not done. Number one, the 10th Assembly, there is a National Assembly bureaucracy that administers the issues and makes provisions for these issues. You need to be able to understand that. And members come, members go. The bureaucracy remains.
Okay.
And it is that duty that every new assembly resuming should be able to function optimally. So these issues, so when we wait to the point where, oh, there's something that breaks on the internet and then everyone is talking about it and it's now reacting to it, it's very valid. I mean, you had that news or that, information breakout on social media on a Sunday morning. Before 2 o'clock, you had a statement from us. That shows that we're responsive. We want to be able to answer to Nigerians. But aside of that, I provided details to help Nigerians understand better. Some misunderstood it. So, for example, I raised the point that, look, this is not exclusive to the legislature. It might sound as though, oh, everybody is doing it, we're doing it too. So that's not the point.
What I want you to clarify is, you said they make arrangement for work tools.
Yes.
How is that kind of SUV a work tool?
So I'm making all these points so that you can understand. So to start with, it's not a Me Too thing, right? But so that you'd understand that even in our activism, because I've been on the demand side of governance as well, in terms of activism to hold government accountable. And I'm saying that, look, these are the areas you need to look into. There are 469 legislators, right? There are 550 ministries, departments, and agencies. There are over 2,000 boards. All of these institutions, all these entities of government, of the executive arm of government, procure vehicles almost every year. So we're not saying it's a Me Too thing. So let's get that point first of all. Yes, we want to hold government account, but spread your drag. Then let's understand what exactly it is that we have as a situation. So that's number one. Number two is you talked about the issue of made in Nigeria vehicles, right? And yes, I've raised the point that there is a national automotive policy that came on stream as at May 23rd of this year that basically states, I think the provision says something around trying to encourage locally assembled vehicles and all of that. And beyond when you say made in Nigeria vehicles, it is our objective as well to also be able to encourage and oversight the federal government to ensure that greater percentages of even what we call locally produced vehicles. Most of these vehicles come in as is it SKDs or CKDs or something, where it's almost done. Right, it's produced abroad. It comes in here and then to be assembled, and then what we even want is greater backward integration to make sure that more parts of the vehicles actually be done within the country. And there is an opportunity, even though we missed that opportunity in terms of the National Assembly, and we would have wanted to own that badge. Personally, if I was in the room where those decisions were made, right, we would have wanted to say, look, how do we ensure that locally made vehicles? But if we miss that opportunity, there is an opportunity as well. And I think that it's a challenge to the National Assembly, the 10th Assembly at this point in time. There is the budget coming up, right? We're expecting the appropriation bill for 2024 coming anytime soon. We're going to be oversighting the executive over the next 4 years. It's important that we also be able to hold the executive to account. And in this point, we need Nigerians. The same energies we've used to criticize the legislature, which we've taken on, right? We've taken that on very well. That, look, if we had the opportunity, these are some of the things perhaps we'll do differently, especially that point about locally produced vehicles. But there is also the opportunity to hold the executive to account. There are going to be hundreds, perhaps thousands of vehicles that are going to be bought within the next year.
Okay.
But if I can make a point just real quick.
Before I interject.
Yes, because there's a broad spectrum of this content. And it's very valid. The country at this point in time, it's extremely difficult. There's a broad spectrum. So some are on the extreme that, look, vehicles are not needed, you shouldn't buy vehicles. Some might say, okay, yes, you should buy vehicles, but you should buy made in Nigeria ones, and all of that. And then some even say that, okay, what happens to the vehicles that were used in the preceding assembly? Yes. So the point about it is that eternal vigilance is what's important. Like I say to people, you don't wait until an assembly has wounded down, right? And then you bring these issues up. It's important.
Honorable,
there is a policy.
Are you intending to correct such?
Well, it is not just about us, and it's not. But there is a policy on the boarding of vehicles, right, which allows that every public official that has used a vehicle as an official vehicle over a period after 4 years, right, with depreciation and all of that, there are some accounting principles that are put in place to be able to say this value, if you want to go away with it, this is the value. And if you check well, there perhaps a number of members that said, well, this car, I don't think it's worth it, I don't want it, and they walk away. So if you want to be able to take that vehicle away, there is a deboarding policy in place. If we believe that deboarding policy, right, is not appropriate, then let us work together towards fixing it. Okay. And it applies not just to the legislature, but to everyone. But this important point I want to make, right, for those on the broad spectrum that say, why should lawmakers have vehicles? An important point. We talked about separation between the executive and the legislature. It's important that everyone is able to be provided with the tools, right, to ensure that we can hold you to account to be truly independent. What does it sound like that? Okay, I have a ministry, I'm going on oversight, right? I'm going to Plateau State, or I'm going to Ogun State, or whatever. I have to call the ministry that I'm going to oversight to say, please, could you provide vehicles to us to meet us and pick us up? Of course, any executive will be happy to do that. But you are compromised ab initio even before going on such. So it's also important to leadership to be able to say, look, we're going to hold everyone to account. And, Right Honorable Abbas Tajina has made that clear, that separation between the executive and the legislature is very important to us. You've been given the tools to be able to function independently. So we want to see that independence from the executive.
Honorable Akin,
yes,
you see, there's a school of thought that, concerning why members should not have cars, or why they shouldn't, be getting cars, individually. Instead, the House of Representatives, as a body, can have cars, and then if someone has to go somewhere, a member, then the transport unit or whatever, takes the person there. Besides, your duty. Let's just look at it now. A civil servant is employed. Mm-hmm. Do they give them a car? No. So, but if the organization you work with would definitely have cars, so if you have to go on an assignment or whatever, the organization takes care of it. So the situation where even if the House of Rep members need to have cars, and if it's for just mobility, that amount. There are cars for 2 million, 3 million, and you take it to your destination. Anyways, but let's quickly get to...
I think you should give me the right to respond to that.
Okay, all right,
because you did mention that, people are employed in the executive as well. At certain levels, vehicles are provided for them. Okay? Now, we've made it clear as well that these vehicles don't belong to members, right? They belong to the National Assembly during the course of that 4 years. It is only afterwards that we have the conversation about converting possibly so it's about being eternal. But the sad thing about it is that all of this agitation and this energy, right, let us sustain it, okay? As the assembly is winding down, let's have conversations about the deboarding policy. There's an extant deboarding policy on vehicles.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much. Let's quickly get to Mr. OK Epia now. You heard Honorable Akin speak. Of course, there are so many issues, and when Dr. Ernest came in, I tried to ask about the challenges that this House of Rep will face. We know that it's beyond the members that we see in the House. We know there are other factors. There are other people outside the House of Representatives who control what they do there. So could you, from your own point of view and then from your assessment of how, the National Assembly has been running in this country, what are the likely challenges you think that this House would face that will probably, limit them in meeting this 8-point agenda they have put forward?
A lot of issues to unpack. The challenges that the current House of Assembly of Representatives will face are not very different from what its predecessors, right, have faced. I would say that we should be a bit patient. Ernest made the point about there are traces of optimism that gives us, there are traces of actions that gives us optimism that this House may be different. We have seen also, quite unfortunately, some activities and actions that also reinforce, the declining confidence, like the issues of cars, SUVs that we talk about. They don't have to be SUVs, for instance, right? Okay, so you don't have to cost that much, for instance. These are valid arguments. And I totally understand the difficulties he faces, Honorable Akirotimi Jr., in trying to, explain these things. These are difficulties. They are perennial. They come up every assembly. In fact, we are making progress. If you recall, from 1999, 2003, 2007, we had issues beyond just cars. We had issues around wardrobe allowances.
Yes.
We had furniture allowances. We had all of these that, very scandalous issues but we see that we're making progress. At some point, we even had, some so-called opening of the budget of the National Assembly under the Saraki, Senate presidency. So we are making some progress, incremental progress, and let's be a bit patient with the National Assembly. But we must also not lose our guard, and I'm happy he recognizes and acknowledges, and indeed encourages Nigerians to be vigilant, and he has thrown the challenge. Can we begin to look onto the deboarding policy for these work tools, as he calls them? That's something that we can keep, in the parking lot and come up to at some points, but I think that we should, at the moment, requests or demand of the House of Representatives specifically, because that is the arm of the National Assembly, the chamber that has shown a greater deal of responsiveness, and inclination towards what the people, are feeling, the sensitivities of the people. The Senate is an entirely different ballgame, and I understand that it's not a conversation for the Senate. Many Nigerians, and I speak with all sense of responsibility, are not impressed with what is going on with the Senate. We can't speak of a Senate legislative agenda, and that's unfortunate. So zeroing in on the House of Representatives, why they are showing these traces, these flashes, early days though they are, we should also, begin to also raise the questions around, being able to implement these things, this 8-point legislative agenda, being able to sufficiently perform their oversight duties, being able to separate themselves in theory and practice from the executive arm of government. It is not a bad thing. Indeed, it's something I actually had advocated for in the past, for there to be synergies between the legislative agenda and the agenda of the executive arm of government. It makes for better, service delivery to citizens. So it is notable that there is that synergy this time around. So it's not a point of rubber stamp. I want to make that point. But that synergy should not be extended to the handshake beyond the elbow. That's where the vigilance comes in. That's where we need to request or ask the National Assembly, why is it that we're seeing a couple of things go through Parliament so easily from the executive, right? Why is it that we see approvals come so quickly? We do not see that detailed scrutiny. The Supplementary Appropriation Act that was passed by the National Assembly both chambers, I do not think that, yes, the House of Representatives showed some activism in cutting down and reallocating, the vexatious 5 billion naira for a presidential yacht, But beyond that, we also saw that approvals were given for items Nigerians are not quite happy with. This is not the time to be purchasing SUVs for the office of the First Lady. This is not the time to be purchasing or doing renovations for, presidential lodges in Lagos. I mean, you're asking Nigerians to tighten their belt. So, yes, we must keep making this point. This is not the time to give, expeditious approval to the MTF. This is especially when you have complained that some heads of MTAs, ministry departments and agencies, did not show up to defend, what's in the proposals. We must be careful. Whilst we want to support, and encourage, the appetite being shown by the House of Representatives in particular, to be people-oriented, we must also make that point early also on in the day to say, look, these are areas you must also be careful not to lose your guards. Otherwise, you will end up being like the 9th National Assembly that was, a phenomenal failure with respect, to the performance of oversight function, right?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts there. Let me come to Dr. Ernest. You see, the issue of electoral reform, has been a recurring theme for Nigeria, especially this last election. A lot of loopholes, and a lot of people have called for the need for the National Assembly to take a look at the electoral reforms. What will you how would you say that the 10th assembly now should be able to look at it in order for them to be able to raise the confidence of Nigeria in the forthcoming elections?
Yeah, thank you. But before I will answer that, I'd like to just speak a little about the last point he made about the 9th Assembly being a phenomenal failure. I think it wouldn't be fair in terms of assessment to categorically say it was a phenomenal failure, because even though I don't speak for the 9th House, but I know while there were challenges, there were some very good points recorded by the 9th House. If you talk about the Petroleum Industry Act that was there for decades, that didn't go through the complete legislative process, then you give the 9th Assembly some credit in that regard. If you talk about the KAMA 2020, you give the 9th Assembly some credit for that, as well as some other issues and some other proactive response of that assembly. You recall in the days of COVID, you recall what the 9th assembly did. Yes, we would have wanted more, as we also now want some more from the 10th assembly. And rightly so, the 10th assembly, the 10th house describes itself as the people's house, meaning therefore that Nigerians should always, be asking questions and be demanding for some more from the 10th house. Now, so I think it would be unfair to categorically say the 9th house was a phenomenal failure. Now, coming to the issue of electoral reforms, if you go through the agenda of the House, electoral reforms, features prominently. And the House intends, from what I have seen, they intend to look at both the Electoral Act as well as some constitutional provisions that affect the credibility of our electoral process and system. And so I believe that if we're able to follow through those measures that have been outlined, and that is one of the interesting things I keep saying about this legislative agenda. It is not just saying we want to reform the electoral system. It is saying that we want to look at INEC, for instance, and see if we can begin to unbundle INEC. For instance, probably we will see the passage of the Electoral Offences Commission as outlined in the agenda. Probably we will see a new body that will be registering and monitoring political parties, part of the unbundling of INEC. Perhaps we will see a new mode of appointing the commission, the INEC commission itself. And also probably we'll be seeing, because the House is also saying they want to look at the relevance of having these resident electoral commissioners. And so I believe that if some of these steps are taken in terms of cleaning up our laws, we'll be improving the electoral system. Now, but it doesn't stop at what the House has said it would do in terms of reforming the electoral process. I'm sure citizens also have their own demands about what we want to see as far as electoral reforms are concerned. Civil society organizations and election observer groups who observe the elections have come up with various recommendations. And so I want to believe that some of those recommendations will eventually go to the various committees of this 10th assembly that are responsible for the reforms that we would want to see in our electoral
all right, many thanks, Dr.
May I just
Rike.
clarify the points very quickly? I was clear, in my contribution. My opinion that the phenomenal failure was qualified. The performance of oversight function.
Okay.
So it wasn't blanket.
Okay.
And the clarification is sought to make where lawmaking and so it's important to put that on
Yes.
record.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we're actually about to go on a break, but when we return from the break, I'd like to get to to Honorable Akin. Yes, but maybe I should just let you know what my line of thought is at this point. While we go on the break, and then you respond. Amongst the 8 key legislative priorities, I can see law reform as one of the items. I really want to get a clear picture. I'm sure Nigerians watching want to understand what that law reform is about, what exactly the focus of the House of Representatives is as regards that. But welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We still have our guests still very much with us in the studio this morning. And before the break, Honorable Akin was going to help us understand what law reform as one of the key legislative focus for this,
10th Assembly.
This 10th Assembly is.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy about that clarification that was made by Mr. Epia, especially because this assembly has to build on what our predecessors have done. And I dare say that Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila did leave a great legacy. The previous speaker also mentioned, there are of course always ways and means to improve on what our predecessors have done, but it's important that we state that. Now, in terms of law reforms, it's also central, like you said, it's one of our legislative priorities. Number one, you have constitutional reform. This is one area that is very particular to me, because you find a lot of rhetoric around, Nigeria can never work. Our 1999 constitution is flawed until we address. So, when I ask is, okay, so what do we do? We have a constitution that is defective, right? I think, broadly speaking, there's broad consensus on that. But there is a process, right, that has, been put in place to be able to carry out these reforms. It's very important that we realize that. And so for us, part of it is, reviewing that whole constitutional review process. And to show you how important it is to us, the chairman of the Committee on Constitutional Review is the Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu, who is the Deputy Speaker, right? A learned fellow as well, a lawyer as well, because it's important to us that we streamline that process. And I want to ask that Nigerians participate in this process. Someone used to say, the late Tajuddin Rahim, if I remember his name correctly, used to say something. He said, don't agonize, you organize, right? Okay, yes, we missed the point about getting a great constitution, but let's work towards fixing it. In relation to that, I would want to encourage everyone, right? There is, on the 28th, I think at Abuja Sheraton, if you'd allow me that free publicity, there is a whole town hall on electoral reforms that the House of Representatives is doing in concert, right, with the Senate, right? And we're working with Yaga Africa on it. If you check on the Yaga website, you'll be able to get details of it. We're saying, look, don't wait, don't lament and just keep, fixing a country is hard work. And we're saying that don't wait until 2027. The end of an electoral cycle is the beginning of another one, right? So for us, we have, the chairman of the electoral committee, right, in the House, collaborating with his colleague in the Senate to be able to say, look, let's put this together early. Nigerians, there are avenues for you to submit memoranda that, look, these are the areas we want. And he did mention a number of points, especially the Electoral Offences Commission, which is also provisioned for in the legislative agenda. It's important that people find it unattractive to perpetrate electoral offenses. The reason why it's become so widespread is because people get away with it. So we want to make sure that that is also done, an Electoral Offences Commission, right? Another point, again, is local government reform. Like we know, there are 3 tiers of government. And it's been so sad that we've undermined that part of government, the legislature. And there's a principle of subsidiarity which says that the arm of government that's closest to the people should take the lead in addressing issues. So when you talk about security, it's the local people. The local people at the local government level that should take the lead in it. Issues around primary health care, issues around universal basic education. These are basic issues, issues of even sanitation, even tax collection. All these issues, the local government tier of government needs to be able to function optimally. We also have decongesting the executive list, right, so that there are more issues for us to be able to legislate on, because if some issues are clearly beyond, it's difficult to be able to. Now, social and economic rights is another one. judicial and just legal sector reform, and then electoral reform. You know, the process that produces our leaders is very important. There are so many issues. We've looked at issues around even equity, equality, right? Gender participation. To be honest, I'm not very happy about the numbers of women in parliament. It's just too few. Well, I'm not happy about it, to be honest.
Is that from your heart, like?
From the depths of my heart. I mean, I really wish that we could, and you'll see here that in the legislative agenda, we've proposed, right? Let us look at those issues of special seats for women, temporary seats, to be able to address this historical challenge. It's not something, I know, yes, there's the argument that it would also, there are 360 members now, you're saying you want to create another 10 or whatever. But if you have seats that can only be contested by women, so you can guarantee that a certain percentage of parliament, and it's important, it doesn't have to be there forever, it can be a transitionary thing to be able to address these issues. There are also issues of people with disabilities, you know, being more inclusive in society. When we have a society that truly carries everybody along, we've also had issues like he mentioned as well, a different body perhaps to be able to look at how political parties, produce candidates. It's important so that we can look at some degree of affirmation. Issue as well about 35% representation of women in elective and appointive positions. Those are also issues that are important.
What about the issue of corruption, which is a very big challenge for this country? How do you intend to address that so that we can have a kind of transparency in governance?
Well, I think important in that line is, all the agencies that work on anti-corruption issues, need to be streamlined somewhat, right? In terms of cooperation as well, and strengthened. We'll look at issues around all the Establishment Acts. It's there. Like any smart legislator can literally take this legislative agenda because we worked on it together. We worked on it together and said, look, you can find your briefs from here, around electoral reforms, around issues of anti-corruption and all of that, because it's very important that people know that there is recompense either for good or for bad done. So issues of anti-corruption is very important. Strengthening the acts that establish, those institutions that look over issues of financial crime and other issues. But aside of that, again, is even the courts, our justice sector, to be able to ensure speedy dispensation of justice, right? And aside of that, you have issues of the whistleblower bill, for example, that is also coming for reconsideration. People need to be protected. People need to know that if I see something wrong, I can escalate it through open channels, through channels where there's confidentiality and I'm protected, in whatever happens. So there are all sorts of legal reforms, constitutional reforms that's enshrined here. And I want to encourage everyone particularly that, look, try to get a copy of this. Your constituency offices, you can reach out to your legislature. It's there on the website to be able to download this. If you go to thegreenchamber.ng, you can download a copy. This is something that everybody should be concerned about. This is going to guide our lives over the next 4 years and even beyond 4 years. Whatever we do, into the future, right? People should get copies of this and know the things that are important to us and work with us. But more importantly is that when you hear issues around public hearings, when you hear issues around town halls, constitutional review engagement, let us get involved. There's a lot of lamentations.
Yes, there's so much lamentation, especially when it comes to this issue of oversight functions of the House. Because a lot of Nigerians believe that the members, they don't actually, do this carry out their oversight functions. What they do is that they just go to the ministries and the parastatals to strengthen them, and once they are settled, and that's it. That is why most of these agencies and government parastatals are not functioning, because if the House, they are actually doing the work of the oversight, will have more, productive and economic, will not be like this. So how do you intend to correct that notion Because, I mean, you believe that the oversight function is very paramount. So how do you intend to correct that notion in this 10th Assembly?
So to start with, I'm happy
To be
you
more
mentioned
transparent.
I'm happy you mentioned it's a notion, because a lot of these things get out into media and into social media, and it's unfortunate because it's reinforced over time without being validated by you. Tell us. I chair the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs. I'm happy to get any details that we'll take up with leadership. There's an Ethics and Privileges Committee that anybody can report any erring member to. And then aside of that as well, is that enshrined in the legislative agenda is the strengthening of committees, right? The capacity of committees, the bureaucracy, the clerks, the those that work with us, to ensure that they have, number one, the tools, and then number two, the capacity to be able to work with legislators to provide this oversight. I think it's grossly unfair. Again, I think that there's a lot more work that we have to do in communicating what we're doing, because where there's that lacuna, people fill it with all sorts of insinuations.
That is the thing.
Like the average legislature is distributed. You mentioned that we have 3 constitutional roles: R for representation, O for oversight, L for legislating or legislative activities, and then there's another one, E, which is empowerment of your people. So that's ROL. That's a Nigerian creation. So you have the average legislator, distributing his time and resources over those 4 critical roles, because those are the roles that you're going to be assessed by your people. You understand what I'm saying? So at every point in time, you're looking what is going on here. Are my people being represented? Oversight. You're in committees. Most weekends you're off on one oversight or the other. We don't talk enough about the pressures, right, on legislators, right, in terms of their health, mental health, and even physical health. The kind of pressures that come from constituents being able to answer to people. I had someone call me the other day at 1 a.m. in the morning, and I picked up my phone like, this has to be an emergency, and it was a woman, and she went like, look, her son just died. And at that point in time, I was broken.
All
and I had
your constituents have your number?
They do. I've not changed my number, so I can't. I try. I can't do enough about taking all calls, because many times you are in committee meetings. The other day, someone came to my office and said they didn't meet me on seat, and there was someone. I said, look, do you know how many committee meetings I'm shuttling back and forth? I'm in telecoms because I want masks in my community to address security challenges.
It's the work that you said you want to do for Nigeria.
Exactly. So I'm not complaining, by any way.
You shouldn't complain.
I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to provide some context, right? That any legislator that is on the ball, you are in committees strategically for reasons. You can't be more than a certain number of committees. If you are not there, you are talking to the chairman, making sure that, look, you're visible, to make sure that, look, whatever is going on, you are abreast because of your people.
All right, because of
time. And aside of that, you have your progression of bills and motion. So the average lawmaker, I don't think we get enough credit. And I understand there have been issues over the years about distrust, especially of legislators. But I tell you, you have in this assembly, 77% are new members, right? You had a huge turnover. You have a lot. Under our Youth in Parliament caucus for people under the age of 45, there are quite a number of us. So there are a lot of young people that don't want to go on with this baggage of, this bad reputation. We want that. This is the line that we draw. From the 10th Assembly, people started to say, these guys are different. These guys,
of course,
are able to bring soccer to people on so many issues. So that is what we're doing.
Actually, the 10th Assembly need to change the narrative.
We're changing that already, and I think I'm very grateful that our our guest today, alluded to that fact that the perception is changing. Everybody's actually saying that, look, the Green Chamber looks like these guys are different.
Because of time, really, we need to wrap up. So, of course, we want to see the change. Nigerians want to see the change.
We are the change.
Yes, we hope that we see the change. And talking about the change, the legislative agenda is looking beautiful on paper at the moment. But we know that policy implementation is considered the graveyard of policy and lawmaking in Nigeria. So, Dr. Ernest, how do you think that this 10th assembly, the change makers, you say you're different,
Yes,
the different,
People's
the
House.
People's House, yes. How do you think the People's House will be able to, beyond rhetorics and resolutions, achieve some of, the points they have noted in their agenda?
Okay, fine. First is to say that the agenda has an implementation framework,
Okay.
and then measurable parameters, as well as time frames within which some of these things are, to be done. Then, importantly, also, is that there is a committee that is charged with the implementation, with ensuring that this agenda is implemented, as well as the other committee that we have equally mentioned. Now, importantly also is that I think this is the first time I'll be seeing civil society organizations specifically mentioned in certain areas. For instance, when you talk about oversight, the portion of the legislative agenda that talks about, changing the narrative about oversight in the, 10th house, it mentions certain specific, civil society organizations in that regard that they would be working with just to ensure that, oversight is improved. If you also talk about electoral reforms or law reforms, for instance, it equally mentions, some of the things that they would, want to do and how they would be done. And so I think it was yesterday that the House inaugurated their monitoring and evaluation committee. And so through that committee as well, to monitor the activities of committees, I think that committee has been also saddled with the issue of the oversight that you talked about, to develop code of ethics and conduct, to regulate the activities of members when they go on oversight, to ensure that they do not bring disrepute, to the House. I think that is also commendable. But as we have said, importantly, because I recall that when this agenda was being developed, there was a citizens' engagement where Nigerians were called to make inputs, into this agenda by the committee led by the House leader, Professor Ihomvre. And so Nigerians made inputs into it. And perhaps that is why they believe that this is the People's House. I believe that ultimately it lies on the part of citizens to ensure that this agenda does not become just one of those rituals that every legislature, comes up with. More importantly, is for us to realize, including members of the House, that governance will take place, perhaps serious governance issues, given our antecedent in this country, will take place just within a space of 2 years. And then from the third year, almost full, politicking, kickstarts for the next round of elections. And so time is of the essence. And then when you are looking at the time, we are talking about 2 years, and we are like 6 months into, these, those 2 years that we are talking about. And so the House must realize that time is of the essence. And as we have said, I think they do realize that time is of the essence, and have started implementing some of the items that they have listed. And for instance, like we said, they started the sectoral briefs, which is contained in the agenda. They have started the capacity development of the House, as they mentioned in the agenda. So again, we throw the challenge to citizens, to continue to hold them to account, because there are key issues in that agenda that should interest Nigerians. For instance, when you talked about law reforms, if you go to local government, the proposal on local government reforms, I think if we follow it through, it will strengthen that arm of government. And recall that when you talk about democracy, you say democracy is the government of the people. For the people. And the government closest to the people is the local government. And so if this agenda is telling Nigerians that we want to reform the local government, for instance, as mentioned in the agenda, that we want to make the local governments a specific, clear, a separate tier of government in the country that will have financial autonomy and have their responsibilities outlined, And also we want to enshrine in the Constitution the tenure of the local government councils. I think these are things that should interest us, which we should take interest in. Now, again, is when the agenda talks about inclusion, particularly as it affects women, there is an interesting provision there. The GO bills will come back. The seats that the honourable member talked about will also be explored. But importantly is the attempt, the House mentioning that they would want to amend the Police Act to ensure that women who are married who are barred from joining the police can join the police. And then that when you join the police as a single woman, that you cannot get married until after 3 years with the approval of the police commissioner. I think they said we want to. So these are interesting things that I think Nigerians, should not just gloss over. Look at this agenda as one of those rituals, one of those documents of the legislature, but take keen interest. If you go to the area of basic education, for instance, where they are
Dr.
proposing...
Ernest, I have to interject you there so that I can bring in some the other speakers also in this discussion. Okay, Honorable Rotimi, I know you want to speak, but let's allow Mr. Opia to say something. I want you to talk on the fact that there is need for, we know that democracy talks more about separation of powers, that is the judiciary, the executive and the legislature, but there is also the need for collaboration so that they will be able to deliver the promises they have given during the electioneering process. So what advice would you give to the legislature in collaboration, collaborating with the executives in order for Nigerians to be able to reap the dividends of democracy? Because we have witnessed in time past where the legislature was at loggerheads with the executives and Nigerians didn't really enjoy the dividends of democracy. What advice would you have, especially now that they have the agenda is aligning also with that of the executive?
Thank you very much. The principle of checks and balances in association with that of separation of powers is what we now need to practicalize. And these are age-long principles associated with democracy. We have seen them practicalized, sometimes misapplied, like I had said in my previous comments with the previous assembly. We have seen traces of collaboration already between the legislature and the executive. It's commendable. We have also seen traces of some form of being subservient to the executive arm of government, and we need to flag that so that we don't see it become a pattern with the current National Assembly. Otherwise, the dividends of democracy that you speak about would elude Nigerians again. Otherwise, our current, unpalatable economic conditions would worsen. Inflation is at what figure today, over 20, the last figure. We are in a public debt situation of over 78 trillion naira, as a government. All of these things happened. There are even questions around the National Social Investment Program, that was, legislated on by the last assembly.
Thank you so much.
What I'm saying is that they need to be aware that Nigerians are watching them perform their oversight functions optimally without being confrontational.
All right, thank you so much. I think we'll leave the conversation at that point. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity where we can, pick up from that point that you left off. So because of time, we're wrapping up now, but I'll just give you, say 20 seconds. 20 seconds. Your last words to Nigerians.
Well, like you said, I would encourage all Nigerians. A lot of very interesting things here. There are issues around even diaspora voting. He mentioned as well that we even have a policy coordinating unit within the office of the Speaker to ensure that there is greater synergy and collaboration. And then I think that this all alludes to the person of the Speaker.
Okay.
The quality of leadership that Right Honorable Abbas Tajuddin. It's very understated, very quiet. I think that for those that look for mentors, I would say that look in the direction of this person. He was one of the most prolific in terms of legislation in the 9th Assembly. He's had a track record. And when you see a very feisty house, a very activist house, with 277 new members, and from 8 political parties, to bring that maturity and consensus building to bear, I think that it deserves a lot of credit, and it's someone to be able to look out for. So I'll just say that let Nigerians work with us. It's not just up to us. We need to work together to be able to deliver the Nigeria
that we want.
Thank you.
Many thanks for your thoughts, and we appreciate you, Honorable Akin Rotimi Jr., House spokesman and Chairman, House Committee on Media and Public Affairs.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to having you in the next 1 year, so we can, talk about what you've achieved so far.
Why do we have to wait till 1 year?
Well,
we can have maybe another 6 months.
Yes.
All right. We also thank Dr. Ernest Tereke, Governance and Development Analyst. Many thanks for joining us, Doctor. And yes, many thanks, OK Epia, Executive Director, Other Paper, Nigeria. Many thanks for being our guest this morning.
Thank you.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria today. Many thanks for joining us. Please do join us again tomorrow. I'm Ian Ray John.
And I'm Ademola Adeoye. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.
This is the Network